Hello, everybody. I'm Tim Jones, and today we continue with our guest star series with Roderick Justice. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Roderick Justice if you don't already know about him and his career and the fact that he has conquered Cincinnati. Like last week we had the King and Queen of New York. This week we have the King of Cincinnati. Before we get started, we want to let you know that because we don't actually have folks in the theater with us, Roderick is 6 feet from me, and he's allowed to take his mask off, which I think will help you to hear him, see him, and ask questions of him. I'll be leaving my mask on. So let's do the big reveal of Roderick Justice. So before we get started, really diving into questions and talking about what he currently does, I wanted to say that Roderick Justice is a graduate of North Kentucky University. You've got your BFA in musical theater performance. And a lot of people know Roderick as the producing artistic director of Cincinnati Children's Theater, but they really don't know the extent of your performance, your performing career, as well as his choreography, which he's a choreographer, and directing, which he directs pages and pages of this. So when you were here at NKU before we even get started, can you just tell us some of the shows that you were in, and a lot of times, or most of the time, you were leaving?
Well, I was, in my first show was a show that you wrote, actually, called Thy Brother's Keeper. I was a freshman. It was my first semester, and I played the younger version of the leading role. Amazing show, and it was a play. And then I got attached to another play, and then another play. So I didn't even do musical for quite some time. I did a show called Lucky Stick. I did a show called Closer Than Ever, which I played a 40-year-old man at the age of 18 or whatever.
Yeah.
Urinetown. Played Bobby Strong in Urinetown. I was in The Elephant Man as John Merrick. And I'm blanking on a lot of Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yes, you were actually Judas.
Yeah.
Judas was Jesus Christ
That was a
Superstar.
fun story one night.
Yeah.
With my microphone went out in the middle of Heaven on Their Mind. I'm like, nobody heard it. And
Yeah, it was actually opening night.
yeah.
It was opening night. Jesus Christ Superstar. You were playing opposite Aaron Labinet, who's going to be our guest artist in November, who is actually now Jesus in the national Broadway tour of Jesus Christ Superstar. You played opposite him, and you came out to sing the opening song.
And my microphone died. So I'm going about my business and trying to project to the big theater, and all of a sudden I feel like the microphone come out. And then it like comes back in because I'm like moving around the stage and it like pops out. And finally I grab it and I'm like, and the microphone, I can't tell
Wasn't turned on.
And at the end, the provost at the time was in the audience and requested that there would be an encore of another line at the end of the show.
Yeah, so after curtain call, he actually sang the song because the microphones were working by then. Yeah, they missed it. And to a standing ovation, a double standing ovation, in fact, one at the end of the show and then one for you to sing the song by yourself again. So that's a cool story. But you also, just to give you an insight into his undergraduate career, Roderick was such a spectacular actor, and he was a member of the improvisation team, that there were musicals written for him. He was actually, 2 musicals were written because of his talent for him to be the lead in, both of which were taken to Chicago premiere and then went on, and you played those roles since then in the same musical that was written for you.
Yes, a couple of times. Burger Town, I played a character called Dan, and quaint little musical about a diner and a love story. It's the perfect cute love story musical about success and what comes with success. And then a show called Church Girls, which blossomed after a show I played here. It was Fat Boy, where I played a woman in the show. And after that run, we sat in your office and talked about the show and that character, and then started talking like the little church lady, which is what played the show. That was the birth of Church Girl.
Right. And both of these shows were NKU productions that NKU actually toured and premiered in Chicago at the Commonwealth Theater Company.
Yeah.
And then went on to be published. And you've played Church Girl 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm.
And Burger Time three times. So that's interesting for students here, that sometimes faculty, staff, and students collaborate on new material that goes on to have a life after the time that you're at NKU.
That's what I love most about my education here, is that it wasn't strictly, you have to do this practice, you have to be a dancer, you have to be a performer. I was able to learn so much more, get my hands dirty on many other aspects of the theater, which has led to a well-rounded knowledge of the business. All right,
Got a question for you. Where were you born?
I was born in Pikeville. It's about as far east as you can get without falling into Virginia.
And that's a huge theater town.
Sure. Sure. Actually, I didn't get to see live performance until I was in third grade. We took a food trip to see a group that performed country songs, skits, like Lawrence Welk meets Seahawk. And that's kind of what drove me to be like, I want to do that. I want to be a storyteller. So yeah, there's a lot of folk art there, folk storytelling that kind of is the base of what I do.
Right. And so Roderick came here. You came here with a background in folk music, storytelling. You already had a beautiful singing voice. You were a strong actor already, who just kind of developed this craft on your own.
Training.
And then you kind of got thrown into NKU. You went through NKU, you graduated. So here's where our story begins. So what did you do after NKU that ultimately ended up bringing you back to be the producing artistic director of the Children's Theater of Cincinnati, which is one of the strongest professional theaters in our the Midwest, not even just Cincinnati, but the Midwest.
Yeah. So I was here during the summer doing a show at Commonwealth Theater Company when I heard some singers on this very stage. And at the time, the man popped out. His name was Jack DeWiso, the artistic director of the Children's Theater of Cincinnati. And you introduced me to Jack, and that's how I made that connection. I was doing a show called, it was 1940's Radio Hour. And the marketing director of the Children's Theater saw the show, husband was in it, Importance of Connection, said to the artistic director, Jack DeWiso, you got to see this show. There's a kid there that would be a great Aladdin in our upcoming production of Aladdin. So reached out to me, reached out to you. I auditioned. I couldn't find the office, missed the audition. They called me back to come in the next day, auditioned, got the role of Aladdin, started performing with them, and found out that my passion, the reason I'm put on this earth, is to do exactly what we talked about. Tell stories, folk stories, tales of some moral caliber to leave an audience wanting to make the world a better place. That's what children's theater does. And so I love performing there. And immediately I made a connection with that man, Jack DeWiso. Very strong connection. He saw a lot of stuff in me, and some of them went back and forth, and he said to me, if you ever want to work for children's theater, let me know, because you'd be a great person to hand the reins. And at the time I was like, but I gotta go to New York because that's just the thing you do. And so I performed there, I choreographed there. We started having to do things that I normally wouldn't do.
You did costumes.
I did costume design. Again, wonderful education at NKU helped build that for me. But and I was doing summer programming, training the next generation on this very stage, STAR program. And then I went to New York. And I was there for a while. I did my first audition. I got an off-Broadway show called The Top Job with another children's theater off-Broadway show. And I had a good time. I appreciated my New York Times. I like square footage. And
Where did you live in New York? That's a question I'd like.
Yeah, I lived in Harlem on 136th Street on Broadway, so right on the one line. So I was fortunate. I was friends with another NKU alum, Tracy Weiler, who was married to the Broadway producer Ken Davenport.
She wasn't at the time.
It wasn't at the time, but I was part of a philosophy. Love relationship. But I was living there, and while I love New York and I love to visit, New York was difficult. And what I found to be more engaging and impactful to my passion, my personal love for what I was put on this earth to do, I kept thinking about children's theater in Cincinnati. So one day I called Jack and I said, that offer that you spoke to me about before I left is still open. And a week later, I was hired at the time. I packed all my stuff in the U-Haul and arrived back in Cincinnati. I was the first associate artistic director for the company, and that was in 2008, and I became the artistic director in 2015.
Okay.
So that's kind of a jumping ahead
Right.
in time, but that trajectory at the Children's Theater, it changed a lot. The face of the Children's Theater has changed a lot in 15 years that I've been working with them.
But that's an important point, I think, for young folks who are now in their college career. You were an actor of musical theater, you were a singer, you were a dancer, you were a choreographer, you did a lot of different things. And you probably never even realized that being an artistic director was going to be your goal many, many years later. And then the other part of that was so interesting about that story is you were the associate artistic director, but it took 7 years. It was 7 years of hard work, directing shows, acting shows, designing shows, producing with Jack, and then the next artistic director, directing again with that particular person before you became the director. So it's hard work.
It's hard work, and you learn a lot. You learn, and I say this with so much love, watching from an associate artistic director's point of view, you learn a lot of what to do and what doesn't work. So I was able to get a good 360 view of how to produce theater, and it certainly shaped how I work today.
Right. It should be noted too that Jack Eliza, who came back and kind of restarted the children's theater many, many years ago, did an amazing job of getting this company going again. But it really was Roderick came in as the artistic director, and not only did he change the level of what they were doing, changed the number of the outreach that they're doing, we'll talk about it a little bit, but he also changed the style of their production. And that's probably more difficult to talk about than to actually see. But there was a definite look to a children's theater show in the Taft Theater before you, and then after you, including now. The scenery, the costumes, the way things move in and out of shows, the quality of the production has changed exponentially over time. So how did you make that jump? I mean, how did you take what was already successful and have the guts to try something new to make it what has now become even more successful?
Children's Theater Cincinnati is the oldest professional theater in the entire country. We just turned 100. So a lot of things can happen and change in 100 years. And what I found to be the case was with change comes celebration, or it could be an off-put. So what happened when Jack took over, this was a change and a celebration of bringing more people in. And the more people he brought in, of course, you can amplify the quality of your production with money. And the funding, this is a nonprofit. We rely heavily on people, ticket sales, and support from outside organizations and foundations. So the more people were tuning into what Jack was doing, we were building and layering on top of that. It really wasn't so much a shakeup, but it was more of showing the public where their funds were going. So putting more funding into not only the production quality, but in the type of production and the elements and the innovation that theater can bring. So instead of just doing Tarzan with a bunch of leaf drops, we embrace the technology of using turntables and innovative ways you can change the scenery. When you have like maybe 3 locations, but they're almost jumpable. How do you do that and still make it entertaining for kids? So we're using and borrowing a lot from cinema, and finding ways to trance the audience into the storytelling that they are familiar with, because theater is constantly competing with Hollywood, and in that mindset with children, so many that we see, you're their first experience, and that's all they know is television. So we're trying to build that bridge through not necessarily spectacle, but spectacular elements that can wow their mind, to bring them into the story rather than just preaching the story.
And having worked with you at Children's Theater as a writer, you have actually commissioned me to write plays, and my writing partner Christine Dave to write plays for you. But you've also had me direct for you. And when you say that you're hitting that audience for the first time, some of those kids, that's the first time they've ever been into a theater. I noticed that working with you, you take that incredibly seriously. I mean, you're not messing around when you talk about that, because every little detail in a show that's put on at Children's Theater, whether it's by you directing or another director or guest directors or whomever is designers, you watch everything because you really want those first timers to have the completely best experience you can give them at the time.
Right. We want it to be lifelong. Well, that is what we're doing for the theater industry. We're creating the next generation of theater patrons, of theater artists, of theater lovers. So every detail, I tried to get it as polished as possible, because I'm always taken back to where I told before, that first theater experience for me, what made me fall in love with theater. I get to do that in a 2,200 seat theater, and that impact is very, very spiritual. I want to make sure that every child in that theater is captivated and that they become lifelong lovers of theater, of storytelling.
Great. You mentioned not-for-profit, and I think to a lot of our NKU students, that's a confusing term. Not-for-profit can sometimes feel like it means it may be like a community theater type situation, but you're actually a professional theater. So not-for-profit actually means that the money that the theater makes goes back into doing the production, as opposed to somebody that's owning stock.
Correct.
But everybody who works at Children's Theater are professionals. They are being paid salary, including actors, musicians, everyone.
Yes. That's a fine line to walk there. Broadway, for the most part, is a for-profit industry. There are a few theaters, companies that run the Broadway gamut that are still under the nonprofit umbrella. But it just means that we don't make enough in ticket sales to support the organization. We rely heavily on sponsorship and the generosity of patrons and grants. So that is the difference.
Okay. Elephant in the room. COVID. So our students have either auditioned for you or were thinking about auditioning for you. Some have performed on your stages before and made money to support their college career here. You had a whole season lined up, and you had to cancel that season. The day you heard that you're going to have to cancel the season, tell us a little bit about what happened at Children's Theater.
Well, there was so much information coming out, and so much unknown, and there's still so much unknown. I had to take a deep breath and not panic, because as long as we understood that every 3 days there would be something new, we would be okay. And we are okay. We have not had to furlough anyone. We kept our staff busy. I was just saying before we said we're on, that the one thing that we always want more of in the theater is time. And we've been blessed with this. So, and I don't want to go into toxic positivity right now, but I've been looking at this through the lens of there's going to be a silver lining, and there's going to be some wonderful, innovative things that come from this time, because innovation doesn't come from comfort, and none of us are comfortable. So expect wonderful things on the back end. And while you won't be able to hire a lot of people right now, we're taking our production in-house and making it a lot smaller and digital. It is just like a slingshot. We're pulling this thing back. We're understanding what's going to happen, and once we're past this on the back end, it's going to explode. And that's been proven throughout history. If you look at historical timelines of events, from pandemics in the past to great recessions and depressions and wars, every time there's something that happens in our American theater culture, there's a reaction. There's a slot to get lost in the story. So expect that to happen. And that's exciting, because on the back end, we're also going to be very innovative. And theater, as we know it, may look different, and that's okay. It should.
All right. Well, and you mentioned before, historically, a good example of another epidemic or pandemic was during Shakespeare's time. Right. So in the middle of Shakespeare writing, there was a pandemic worldwide, the world as it was known at the time, which wiped out the population down to almost 25%. Out of that came more Shakespearean plays, restoration, and kind of the theater as we know it today grew out of that particular time. So do you think there's going to be a major surge like that in the theater world, in the United States and the world, that what comes out of this will be that changing, that life changing?
I do, and I don't think it's going to look like what we typically think theater is to be. And it should be good, because there's going to be so much innovation and new works. Think about all of the playwrights that have had brilliant ideas, have been ferociously typing out these wonderful works that are going to be produced in the future, and the innovation that is going to come from this. The way we are now more connected, that I'm able to speak to so many of you who are tuning in an empty theater. I mean, who'd have thought that we would be able to have a digital season when the licensing industry has been like, you're not going to sell out to streaming rights. Well, take away every penny that you're going to receive, and you're going to start getting streaming rights. And that's when you open the world to theater accessibility. 3,000 people, when we first started this, we launched a program called TCP Everywhere, where we took past productions, even ones that was commissioned for us, and we did a watch party and had them run on our social media channels. And Casper, the Friendly Musical, was the first. And 3,000 views later, that's like half of the people that saw it in person. And those were just views of families that watched the musical together virtually. We wouldn't be able to see those people, and they're tuning in from all over the world. And so I don't know what it's going to look like, and I'm okay with that. But what I would caution you to do is to think that everything's just going to go back to normal the way it was, and because we should embrace the change.
I have a question that I think a lot of our students would ask. Let's say the world is back to where it's going to be. You're doing production again. What do you look for? I mean, you have these massive auditions. You're casting. You cast regionally for the most part. You do sometimes bring guest artists from New York or LA or Chicago, but most of the time it's regional talent that come. When I say regional, I'm going all the way up to Chicago and down into the deep south and over. But what do you really look for in an audition? What makes you decide why out of hundreds of people you see, you pick those 20 people? What are some of the clues you can get for it?
That's a great question. The one thing I will say is talent is subjective. A person's work ethic is enough. If I want to work with you, if I see the talent, that's a perfect match. You can be the most talented person in the world, but if I don't want to work with you, if no one wants to work with you, if you have a reputation of being hard to work with, then why would I spend money to do that when there are so many talented people? So I think the number one thing I will look for, besides talent, which is that's kind of the thing, is who wants to be there, who is going to be telling the story from a place of truth and honesty and integrity, and will be respectful of the leader's mission, but respectful of everyone else. Are they on time? Are they communicating well? Are they going to call out in the last 10 seconds because they haven't been feeling well all day? Or will they call in the night before to say, I'm not feeling well, to give you a heads up? I mean, those little things play a big role in getting a role. Just making sure that you're a good collaborator and you show them you want to be there and why you are more easy to work with than someone else.
Okay. Have you ever, I think some people, everybody watching, would be like, I'll be terrific. But every now and then, you have somebody who might not be living up to the expectations you had as a performer, whether it's tardiness or not knowing their lines or how they interact with the cast. Sometimes I think those particular people think that, well, that's the Children's Theater of Cincinnati. I may not work with them again, but then I'll go work in the city or I'll go work in New York City. Have you ever seen this, and can you talk to how that ripple effect can spread out?
Yeah, I see it all the time. People that I have made wrong judgment calls, I cast them in their party or they cause drama, and I never say resting a person, but I do take that into consideration every time they come in. But I think what it's important to remember is the connection to get you anywhere, and then the talent to stay. But yeah, when you go to New York, when you go to Chicago, everybody's going to be talented. But think about all the people that have led to where you are and making sure that you have built up those connections and you aren't burning bridges, because they will lead you to success. I can't stress this enough. When you are in a situation where you walk into a room and you realize the person behind the table is somebody that maybe you did not get along with, or maybe said something behind their back, that's happened in this situation where someone walked into the room, I'm behind the casting table, and I looked up, I'm like, oh, I think I went to high school with that person. Wow, I think that they were in my youth choir. You were a jerk to me. I'm not going to hold that against them now, but they've got to prove their worth, right? They've got to take themselves out of that stigma. And then I would see people walk through that have been like, wait, you were my teacher in college, and I loved you, and you're auditioning, and sure, they prove they've got the talent, and that it makes me work up and listen. You want to surround yourself with people that are easy to work with and are going to help tell the story the best way possible.
And I think it's important to know too, because I think, again, sometimes when you live in a city that has a great theater scene like Cincinnati does, sometimes you're like, I grew up here, I want to get out of here and try another city. And sometimes people who grow up in a certain city push that city behind them. But for example, like Roderick is connected to Disney production. You're connected to Universal Studios. You're connected to, you mentioned Tim Davenport, who won the Tony for producing Once on the Island. You are connected to Broadway, off Broadway. You're connected to Music Theater International, and then you have this kind of spiderweb network of large professional children's theaters throughout the country and the world who you are connected with. You're dealing with them all the time. So it's not just you in a bubble in your theater. You are constantly, because I know for a fact that you travel all the time to see new works, work in the city, go explore rights for new plays that Disney's creating or Universal's creating. So could you talk a little bit about that? I mean, that kind of spiderweb of networking that you have yourself.
Well, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. I get calls all of the time saying, have you worked with blah, 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 from other artistic directors, other people who are developing all of the time, of people that have left Cincinnati and are now exploring a new city, which is great. You should explore the world and get out there and see what else is going on. Just goes back to what I was saying before. You need to nurture your path. Don't burn a bridge. But yes, that spider web that you call it is true. What I tend to do is make sure that I'm serving the children's theater mission and our strategic plan to build this theater and reach as many people as possible. So in doing that, I have to make connections with people that hold rights to shows or books or movies that I would like to see adapted into premiere shows at children's theater, because world premieres are very strong ways to get new heights. So I've got to focus on developing new works. You'd be surprised, but there are very, very few. There's a small market for theater for young audience, and the work that we do is not the typical children's theater way. We have a 2,500 seat theater. Most children's theaters are 300 around that size. So we are looking at more commercial titles to grab those kids in, and then we have another division, our touring division, that takes more obscure, more historical, more social issue based stuff. So we're able to come at it from both ways, but that's so important, is to build those connections. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. How I got connected with Universal was through just cold calling. I'm like trying to call up the head of NBC Universal, and I'm like, hey, his name's Robert. Is Bob there? And I'm trying to like get in. Like, oh, no, buddy, Robert. So that's it first. And
was that for Casper?
That was for Casper, yeah.
So you were able to get the rights from the cartoon Casper, and then have that created from that, a musical.
Yes, a new musical. It had a live on the West End, and it was heading to Broadway with Chief Rivera, and then it vanished. But the rights were sold from license. It ended up with Universal Studios, and you can call up an author or the illustrator of a cartoon and try to work with them to get a musical going. But when you're going all the way up to the top, it's a hard journey, but it takes persistence. But along the way, you meet a lot of people, and those people will help you get connected to other people. People from Disney theatricals are like, oh, you need to call this person at DreamWorks, which is owned by Universal. And so it's a web of connection. And I'll say it again, connections to get you there.
And you've done some huge projects. You've commissioned tons of shows. You've taken pieces that people thought people would never get the rights to. Superman.
Mm-hmm.
There was a musical Superman written in the 60s.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of put on the shelf. And you brought back this adult musical and talked to the original author and had that turned into a children's a musical for children, not a children's musical, a musical for children, and redone. You created original content with writers. You've also gotten stuff like Rudolph, and you've gotten Charlie Brown's Christmas. You were one of the first people to get Charlie Brown's Christmas, which the rights were locked down. So how do you, again, does it go back to just the way you navigate it? I mean, because other people have tried and haven't been able to get those particular rights.
I think it's reputation. It's making sure that my blanket letter, when I ask for something as big as, say, Frosty the Snowman or any of those big titles that I want to grab, and if it's a new person that doesn't know the children's theater, it's a blanket email that it's basically a copy paste of who we are, and then photos of our show to say, this is the quality we produce. I know you may not have heard of us, but look at what we can do, and look how many people will be able to experience this character's journey or the story or the moral through licensing in the future, and we can develop it for you. So it's a lot of persistence, a lot of waiting. So almost 3 years, 2.5 years to get Superman. And there's an inherent reason why I go after those titles, because there is a strong moral, which goes back to both failing and my roots of the moral of the story is important. So I think that the persistence is important, and the no's that you will receive, heard it many times. You're going to receive a lot of no's. I receive a lot of no's whenever I go after titles. It just should fuel what you do. It's like a vacuum cleaner. So you knock on one door, they tell you no, you can't go into there. You have to go to the next house, knock on the next door, audition for the next role. You are selling your product, and if someone doesn't want to buy your product, that's okay. They may already have a vacuum, just like Roderick Justice. They don't need another one. That's okay.
Perfect. Okay, the children's theater, how many employees?
We currently have 32 full-time employees and hundreds of contractors who work with the union, the state union, and of course our actors and touring actors, designers, directors.
And when we say children's theater, that does not mean, because some people are saying, why are we watching this? But how could I audition for that if I'm not a child? Can you explain that? And have you had difficulties with that?
Oh, all the time. People are like, oh, how many kids do you work with? Well, we do work with kids, but this is theater for children, not theater by children, which is a common misconception, and understandably so, since the word children's theater is in our name. But we are theater for children and professional theater for children. So a lot of the stories we tell have adults and children in the role. So we do cast professional adults and professional child actors. We do take all our actors.
And in the history of children's theater, with your time, Jack's time, Angela Walker, who was the artistic director, in between the two of you, you used every kind of actor, from equity contracts, equities in state actors union. You've had Broadway stars appear. Jack, I remember Jack had, Broadway stars. Yeah. You've had athletes, professional athletes from the professional NFL teams or NBA teams who have performed. Regional actors who are professionals. And then you've also given the chance for college students, high school students even, and local actors who are not, have never done a professional thing. You've given the chance to many people to become professionals.
Yeah. Well, saying this, it goes back to the whole art. It's a community effort. You're telling a story, a moral of the story for your community. And whether you are a Broadway star, if you are in this show, in this city, speaking to an audience that is on this little speck of earth, on this planet, you are part of that community. It's a community effort, it's a community story. And so the storytelling aspect must include and represent people from not just actors. I love to bring in people like Bob Herzog, news anchors, and Anthony Munoz, who was a football player, and finding ways to incorporate the whole community, whether they are aspiring actors or they can help to sing in their church.
Okay. One of your personal passions when you're doing theater is not to ignore what is happening in your community or what's going on in the world around you. So you made it a point of getting the message to children, who basically your audience and their parents, reflecting on what society is doing. And so can you tell us a little bit about how that is and how you navigate that with children?
Yeah. When you are speaking to children and you are using theater as a vehicle to discuss some difficult topics, we do so in a way that is digestible to them, but we don't want to talk down to them. So you're going to see us doing projects like the show called Polka Dot, where we talked about Ruby Bridges and a Little Rock Nine, but we told that story in a way where we used shapes. So Lily Polka Dot was the first polka dot to attend an all-square school. So we are teaching history and teaching what it means to be a human through theater. We also want to make sure that we are well represented, not only in the work that we put on the stage, the moral of this work, but people in the show and people backstage. So we have a whole diversity, equity, inclusion, and access plan that is going to we're still continuing to work on, make sure that we widen that scope and we have more offerings that includes everyone. It's important for children and not to shy away from the topic, but it's important for them to hear some of these more difficult topics that maybe no one's ever going to talk to them about, because everyone is saying this is too adult for them. We're not making their minds for them, but we are shedding light. We're building empathy so they can better understand, make better conscious decisions, make the world a better place.
And that brings me to a point of your personal style. Again, having directed for you, Roderick actually hired me to direct shows on his MainStage or write shows for you. As the artistic director, as our boss, you're very particular about being very careful when writing a children's show or directing a children's show that we're not making it for children.
Right.
You talk about that a lot, that children are more adult than we think they are, or have a better understanding of what's going on.
And on the flip side, who has ever been a child? I mean, we are all children. We're all big kids. That person that watched Saturday morning cartoons or that experienced that play for the first time, that person's still here. And so when you watch a children's theater show, you should be taken back to that moment in your life and experience it with the little one beside you. It's just magic. I mean, it really is. To look out there and hear, I'm using Tarzan again, but singing You'll Be in My Heart, and then seeing moms hug the child next to them. It's just a beautiful moment to bring people together and through storytelling. So yes, we write shows, we speak to our audience as if they are all very intelligent children, because they are. They're very intelligent and they will call you out, and believe me, they have.
Let's go back to when you were a student at NKU, because they just heard about your success. And by the way, Roderick has won numerous awards. You were just recognized for
Being under 40.
right, 40 people under 40 who have the most power and prestige in the greater Cincinnati area.
Yeah, when that came through, I was like, gosh, I'm still under 40. I've been in quarantine for so long. I don't know. Did I do
You might wake up
right?
in your 80s. But he's won numerous awards. Not only that, but the children's theater, he's guided the children's theater to win awards as well for all different areas of children's theater. So you're highly successful. You're the king of Cincinnati.
I will stop.
Yes, he makes like $1 bazillion.
I do not.
I'm sure he has like a garage full of cars everywhere. But when you were a kid, that means that because you're so successful now, every time you auditioned, you were completely confident. You never had any fears, and you aced your homework and assignments all the time. Is that true?
Well, here's the thing. I was very passionate about storytelling, and I had a learning disability that was undiagnosed. So it was very difficult for me academically at first. So I mean, there's nothing that says that if you're a straight A student, that is a measurement of success. To me, I'm still like figuring this all out. I don't see myself as success per se, but thank you for the support.
You own an airplane.
I do not.
I think there's an airplane in London Airport.
It's like this big. It's a toy airplane. But I had trouble. I had a disability of being able to focus, which today I'm able to keep that under control. But I speak to everyone out there who doesn't fully understand why they're not grasping a certain aspect. There is people like me who went through that same process and was very hard on themselves. I would stand on the stage and audition, and that was I was like, I can do that. I can be nice to people, but I did have that struggle in standardizing. When I was able to break out and do things that were out of the norm, improv class or certain wonderful teachers that were here who took a non-traditional approach to education, and it wasn't a read this, take this on this, read this. It opened up my eyes to new ways of processing information and retaining. So I think NKU, thank you for that.
When he's not on his personal yacht, I think about when you were, how you look at you today, and you're successful, highly successful, you dress beautifully. But there was a time when you would come into an improv class, because he was on the improv team for 4 years.
Yeah.
You got on as a freshman and you were on for 4 years. And you were a crazy man at improv, probably one of the most experimental improvers I've ever known. Whether it was through singing, again, another person who could improv a song, but just go way, way beyond. So tell us a little bit about, because I think you've said before that improv was kind of your acting class, and how can they use that? Whether they're on the improv team or whether they're in, we have an intro to improv class now, or whether they're taking it in Corey's class, an improv, and now my team's class, or Brian Robinson's class, or my class. How does improv, did that shape you and shape your acting ability and all that?
I think improv is the base of acting. It is acting. Theater is a reflection of human life. And when you are improv, you are taking yourself and putting your identity on a shelf and literally stepping into another person's shoes. If you're being a costumed improv character, if you're doing sketch comedy, it's interesting that style of acting can give you so many perspectives and let you explore and let you be wrong. And there's many times where I would leave an improv class going, whoa, I went there. That was a plus. Yes, but that's okay because everybody there is forgiving. You're not going to say I have to this one character and I have to stick with the new line and I have to have this point of view and this is why they said this the moment before. And in improv, you get a chance to build that from nothing. And sometimes you get maybe a flicker of you're here and this is the situation and you're at this location. Go, oh, that's great. But for the most part, you are building characters from nothing. There's no backstory. And I think that is the basis of acting, is being able to create something from it.
And as you said before, you and I actually improv after you created this character on stage. We thought the character was so funny that you and I improv together and created from that improv created an entire musical that's now been done 4 times. It's it's been done around by other people. The music's out there. So a lot of that can come there. What have you ever used improv when you were auditioning in New York or auditioning for other theaters or film or television? Did improv ever pop back up, or was it just strictly you auditioned for monologue and you never?
Oh, all the time. And one place where it was very useful is dance.
Okay.
So in a dance call, they're like, and last 12 counts, do whatever you want. So if it's a musical comedy, why wouldn't you make them laugh at something? If it's a drama, making something more dramatic. So I think that was very useful. I had to take if it's a new musical that you're auditioning for and you have the script and you know nothing about the show, just know that they don't expect you to know the show or the new show. So being able to go back and be like, I'm just going to probably do this and create my own character, my own story, and why they're saying it was very useful in that audition room and more informed and come to the call with a better perspective of and understanding of what this character is. And I think that 100% fit improv.
Right. And again, we're not talking about just the improv class. We're talking about improv that's different styles of improv. Freeing your mind.
We used to do it all the time, just hanging out with our friends. After improv class or being at another person's house on a weekend, we would just improv each other and take on characters, just banter, just like we did.
Yep. And for the last thing before, I know we have to go, but for the last thing, I want to talk a little bit about, you were this huge, you came, like you said, you came in and started doing plays at the beginning, but then you became a musical theater star in our program, like playing the roles that you played. And you continue to do musicals, but then you made it very clear as a student that you shifted your gears almost in your senior year, and you really, really wanted to do like the play Elephant. You wanted to go back to acting and just pure acting. Tell us a little bit about that, because I know there's a lot of musical theater students, they only want to do musicals, but what's the value of doing plays sometimes, even if you are a spectacular singer?
Well, at the core, they're the same, because the musical is just singing what you do. And what I can't stand is going to a musical where they're just spouting off lyrics and they're singing pretty, but have like no perspective of what they're saying or what they're singing, what they're trying to move. It's just, well, they riffed a bunch of times and that's kind of pretty, but I don't think they understand a single word of Good Morning Welcome. But they are inherently the same. And what I did my senior year is I constantly said, I need to make sure that I understand that. I want to challenge myself to the fullest degree to make sure that I have rooted myself, be able to tackle the importance of being earnest or the Elephant Man, and be able to do it successfully, whether or not it's all subjective. But for me to be able to say outside of musical theater that I feel very confident about, I want to make sure that I'm rooted in the dramatic work of a play. So, had to sure.
All right, everybody. Thank you, Roderick Justice, for being here today.
Thank you for having me, for tuning in. Come and enjoy the children's theater. We have a digital season, so we have our first show on Broadway on demand right now. It's called Harriet Coven and straight about on the underground.
Great. And you'll be having productions drop online. Yeah, if you hire.
Yes, and Daryl Harris is directing for us. We've got a show called Martin Street, focusing on the life of Martin. He's directing that out there. We filmed and airing in January.
Great. Join us next week. We have Henley Abraham, who was also a student of ours. I've worked with her before. She was an NKU student. She got her degree. She's a musical theater person who you might have seen on the Glee project on NBC. And she's also toured with the National Broadway tour of Beautiful and what's on the side. Yes. And she will be with us next week here again. So thank you for showing up, and thank you, Roderick.
Thank you. Best of luck, everybody.